Hook! It was one of those freezing winter nights when the wind seemed to slice through your bones. In a small, broken-down trailer on the edge of town, a single dad named Mark was tucking his little boy into bed when he heard a faint knock on the door. When he opened it, there stood a young girl, shivering, drenched from the rain, her face pale with fear. She said she was lost. Mark had almost nothing to his name, barely enough food, barely enough heat, but what he did have was a heart too big to turn anyone away. He let her in, not knowing that the small act of kindness that night would change his and his son's lives forever. Hey everyone, welcome back to your channel name, where we share powerful true-to-life stories that remind us of the beauty of kindness and humanity. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. We love hearing your thoughts and stories of kindness too. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable story. Mark was 34, a mechanic who had fallen on hard times. After his wife passed away 3 years earlier, he was left to raise their 6-year-old son, Tommy, all by himself. Life hadn't been kind to him, bills piled up, his old truck barely ran, and the trailer park manager was threatening eviction if rent wasn't paid soon. Still, Mark did his best to stay strong for Tommy. Every night, he'd read him stories about heroes, men and women who fought through hard times and never gave up. What Tommy didn't know was that his dad was one of those heroes, too, just without the cape. That night, the sky had opened up with a brutal storm. Rain pounded against the windows like drumbeats. The power had gone out, and Mark was using a single flashlight to keep the darkness away. He was just about to close his eyes when he heard that knock, soft, hesitant, almost afraid. He froze for a moment. It was nearly midnight. No one came around this part of town that late. But then the knock came again, louder this time. Mark grabbed his coat and opened the door. There she was, a girl who looked maybe 16 or 17, soaked to the bone, hair dripping, her hands trembling. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Please," she whispered, I got lost. My car broke down a few miles back. My phone's dead. Can I just stay here until morning?" Mark hesitated. He didn't have much, just a leaky roof, a couch with springs poking out, and some leftover soup on the stove. But he could see the terror in her eyes. She looked like she'd been out there for hours. "Of course," he said softly. "Come in, sweetheart. You'll catch your death out there." She stepped inside, her sneakers squishing against the floor. Tommy woke up from the noise and peeked from his bedroom. "Daddy, who's that?" he asked sleepily. "This young lady's lost," Mark replied. "She'll stay with us tonight. Go back to bed, champ." Tommy nodded and smiled shyly at the girl before disappearing into his room. Mark handed the girl a towel and some of his late wife's old clothes, the only clean ones that might fit. She thanked him with a shaky voice. He heated up some soup and handed it to her. She took it, her hands still trembling, and whispered, "Thank you, sir. I didn't think anyone would open the door." Mark smiled sadly. Everyone deserves a warm place on a cold night. As they sat by the small propane heater, she introduced herself as Lily. She said she'd been driving home from a friend's house when her car broke down on the highway. She'd tried calling for help, but her phone had died, and the storm made it impossible to see where she was going. Mark didn't ask too many questions. He could tell she was scared, and maybe a little embarrassed. So, instead, he talked about his son, about how Tommy loved to build toy cars out of scrap metal from the garage. Lily smiled for the first time that night. "He sounds like a smart kid," she said softly. "He is," Mark replied, his voice warm with pride. "Smarter than me, that's for sure." When morning came, the storm had cleared. The trailer was quiet except for the sound of Tommy giggling in the kitchen. Lily was sitting at the table, helping him draw with crayons. Mark watched them for a moment, this young girl with kind eyes and his son laughing like he hadn't in weeks. It made his heart feel lighter than it had in a long time. When Lily got ready to leave, Mark offered to drive her to her car. They found it a few miles down the road, just as she'd said. He helped jumpstart the engine. Before leaving, she turned to him and said, "Thank you for trusting me. Not everyone would have done that." Mark shrugged with a smile. "The world's hard enough. We all need a little kindness once in a while." She paused, almost like she wanted to say more, then nodded. "I'll never forget this." A few days passed, and life went back to its quiet rhythm. Mark returned to work at the auto shop, trying to scrape together enough to keep the lights on. Then, one afternoon, a sleek black limousine pulled into the dirt driveway outside his trailer. Mark frowned. "This has to be a mistake," he muttered. "Nobody that rich ever came down this road." A man in a suit stepped out and asked, "Are you Mr. Mark Johnson?" Yeah." The man smiled politely. "Someone would like to see you." Before Mark could say anything, the back door opened and out stepped Lily. Except this time, she wasn't wearing ripped jeans and a hoodie. She was dressed in a crisp coat, her hair neatly tied back, and standing beside her was an older man with silver hair and the kind of presence that filled the space. "Lily?" Mark asked, stunned. She smiled. "Hi, Mark. This is my dad." The man extended his hand. "Richard Bennett," he said. "I believe my daughter has you to thank for her safety the other night." Mark blinked. "Wait, Bennett? As in Bennett Industries?" The man nodded. "That's right." Mark's jaw dropped. He'd just given shelter to the daughter of one of the richest men in the state. "I didn't know," he stammered. Richard chuckled softly. "That's what makes it even more remarkable. You helped her out of kindness, not because of who she was." Lily stepped forward, her eyes full of emotion. "You didn't have to let me in that night. You barely had enough for yourself, but you still shared what you had. I told my dad everything. We want to help you, Mark." Mark shook his head immediately. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would have done." Richard smiled gently. "Unfortunately, not everyone would have. But we insist." Within a few weeks, Mark's world completely changed. A brand new truck appeared in his driveway with his name on the title. The auto shop where he worked received new tools and repairs courtesy of Bennett Industries. And one day, Mark got a call and offered to manage a small repair center that Bennett's company was opening nearby. He could hardly believe it. Lily and her father didn't just help him financially, they became part of his life. Lily would often visit, spending time with Tommy, bringing books and art supplies, or just hanging out like old friends. Mark never asked for any of it. He was just grateful. But what meant more to him than the gifts was the lesson Tommy learned, that kindness, even when you have little, can change everything. Months later, as spring rolled in and the days grew warmer, Mark stood outside his new home, not a trailer this time, but a small, cozy house with a garden. Tommy was chasing fireflies in the yard, and Lily was sitting on the porch, laughing with him. Richard had stopped by that evening. He handed Mark a check, a donation to help other struggling single parents in the community. Mark looked down at it, overwhelmed. "You really don't have to do this," he said. Richard smiled. "You gave my daughter shelter when she needed it most. Now, it's our turn to make sure others find the same kindness you showed." Mark swallowed hard, his eyes misting over. "I'll use it well. I promise." "I know you will," Richard replied. That night, after everyone left, Mark sat on the porch watching the stars. He thought about how one small decision, opening his door to a stranger, had changed everything. He realized that kindness doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from the heart. And sometimes, when you give without expecting anything back, the universe has a way of giving it all right back to you. He looked over at Tommy, who had just run up, holding a jar full of glowing fireflies. "Daddy," Tommy said, "did helping that girl make us lucky?" Mark smiled, ruffling his hair. "No, buddy. It made us blessed." And that's the story of Mark, the single dad whose simple act of kindness opened the door to a whole new life. Kindness costs nothing, yet it's the most valuable thing we can share. You never know whose life you might touch or how that moment might come back to bless you one day. If this story warmed your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness. This is your channel name, reminding you that no matter how small your gesture may seem, kindness always finds its way home.